Hello and welcome to Trust Me, I'm a Philosopher, where we explore what trust is, why it matters, and how to build it. But this video is going to be a little bit different. Let me explain. So, this will still be a Trust Me, I'm a Philosopher video where we talk about trust, but I'm writing a book on the philosophy of trust. And so this is the first part in a series that's going to be devoted to charting the writing of that book, exploring and developing my view as we go, and talking through all of that with you here on the channel. There will still be other things going on the channel, don't worry, and we will get to some philosophy of trust in just a minute. But other videos will continue to come out looking at things. This is going to be an addition to what's going on here already. And if you want to get ahead to the trust part of the video today, then just jump ahead a little bit. But why make a series of videos about a book that I'm working on? Well, there are three reasons. The first is my accountability. So I've tried to write books before, I've written books before, I've also started writing books but never got finished and ended up just coming out as bits and pieces in articles. So all the research got used, but it didn't quite find its way out in a book. But by sitting here in front of all of you and telling you that I am writing a book on the philosophy of trust, well, now something had better happen. And so coming here, talking to all of you about progress, what's happening, how the book is developing, is going to be a really helpful part of that accountability process for me. Second, I think this is going to really help me because there is nothing quite like having to explain something to someone to make sure that you really understand it. I think that that's the gold standard in making sure that you really understand something if you can actually put it out into words. And so by making these videos, really forcing myself to think through what's happening and make sure I understand it, I think that's going to be a big help to me. And last but by no means least, I hope it might be quite interesting. I hope. So normally, when you engage with philosophy, what you're doing is you're reading a journal article or perhaps an introductory text or a full-blown research monograph. But you don't get to see the slow incremental development of the view across the weeks, the months, the years that it takes, however long it takes to actually get to the creation of it. And so what I'm hoping is that by letting you see what's going on behind the scenes, talking to you about the views, perhaps having your input in the comments, it could be quite an exciting, quite an interesting way to go about developing this research monograph. But hopefully it'll be a really fun thing to do. So get into the comments if there are things that you'd like me to talk about in the development of the book, if there are particular things you want me to talk about in the book. All of that said, we should probably make sure that we do actually talk about some of the philosophy that's going into the book. So let's get back to normal business. All right, with all of that explained, let's get into some of the philosophy then. So I think that there are some things that a good book, a good philosophical theory of trust, should do. When we're doing philosophy, one of the things that we're going to try and do is to understand the concepts that we're using. In the case of trust, that's going to be the concept of trust and nearby concepts like trustworthiness, reliance, and so on. We're going to look to try and explore exactly what those concepts, those ideas really are. And to illustrate that a little bit, suppose that I say, I trust my friend, and you say, oh, I trust my friend. There's a particular locution, there's a particular form of words that we've both used in our sentences. We've basically said the same thing. We've said something that means the same. We've used our words to express our ideas, our concepts. And what the philosophers who are interested in trust, or one of the things that the philosophers who are interested in trust are going to be interested in, is trying to really dig into and nail down what those concepts, those ideas are that we share. I have a concept of trust, you have a concept of trust. I, as a philosopher, am trying to understand what those concepts are, and I'm assuming that they're the same sort of concept. Well, I can't dig inside our heads with a little shovel and take out the concept of trust, put it under a microscope and have a look at it. That isn't going to work for all sorts of incredibly obvious reasons. So in order to understand this concept of trust that I'm using, that you're using, that we're all using, we've got to do something else. So what are we going to do? Well, one of the things that we do as philosophers is we reflect on how we use ideas and concepts. So I'll have a little bit of a think about how I use the concept of trust, how it operates for me, and I'll talk to other people about how they use it, and that will give me a bit like an initial set of data on how trust is used, and that will enable me to understand what's going on with the idea. From there, though, we'll also imagine how the concept and how the words would be used in various kinds of hypothetical scenarios. If you've ever heard of philosophers exploring thought experiments, that's one of the things that we're doing. We're imagining hypothetical scenarios, and we're working out how particular concepts do or don't apply in those scenarios. And we're doing those as tests, simulations, to see whether or not our theories are predicting the right kinds of answers in those scenarios. But there is, of course, then something else that we can do, and that's look at the wider usage of the concepts and of the words that we're interested in. In this case, trust, trustworthiness, reliance, and so on, all of those lovely concepts. How are they actually used in the wider world? Well, that would involve us tracking usage, exploring the way that these terms are used in other domains, in discussions outside of philosophy. And it's here that I think there's been a little bit of a gap in the philosophy of trust. I think philosophers of trust have done an absolutely brilliant job of some of the first parts of what I talked about, that reflecting on our own uses of trust and those around us, reflecting on the way that the concept of trust would work in hypothetical scenarios. There's brilliant work that's been done there. But I don't think we've been quite so sensitive to the way that the terms and concepts involved in trust are used in other domains. So in discussions of AI and politics and data and branding and even very straightforward parts of people's everyday lives. So to give you an example of the sort of thing that I mean in the really prosaic everyday life category, think about a ladder. Okay, just an ordinary humdrum ladder. Now, lots of philosophical theories look like they say that all trust that we should be interested in that has a kind of moral component where we can feel betrayal when the trust isn't upheld, all of that trust is only interpersonal, which is to say it's the kind of trust that I as one person will hold towards you as another person, or vice versa. But it's interpersonal, it connects people. So if that philosophical canon is right, you can't trust a ladder. Now, I don't want to say that you should trust a ladder, but let's have a little bit of a think, shall we, about what might happen. So imagine that you're doing some DIY, it's been a long day, you're frustrated, you're tired, and the ladder collapses underneath you when you're halfway through a task. You fall to the floor, you are somewhat injured, but actually what's really injured more than anything else is your pride. It's your ego. I think in the heat of the moment, you might feel betrayed by the ladder. You might think it has morally wronged you. Now, you shouldn't think that. Like, the ladder is an inanimate object. There is no way you should be thinking that this ladder has betrayed you. Ladders do not betray people. People betray people. Fine. But that you shouldn't do something doesn't mean that you won't do it. But sometimes we don't do things that we should. We do things that we shouldn't. So I think there are perfectly plausible scenarios in which you might feel betrayed by a ladder. You might feel it has genuinely morally breached your trust. That's an example of the kind of thing that I think we can pick up on when we explore the way that people use language and concepts and ideas when we move away from the philosophy. And I've given you a prosaic, everyday kind of an example. But then when I think we start to dig back into things like artificial intelligence and driverless vehicles as a subset of those, and our relationship with inanimate objects, and companies and brands, and so on and so on and so on. When we dig into all of that, I think we come up against a number of different ideas that our philosophical theories haven't actually managed to capture as we might wish. And so one of the goals, I think, of this book, and one of the things that I'm really hoping is going to mark it out as a unique and interesting book, no pressure here, is that it will have something really interesting to say, building on my ought account of trust that I'll link to down below, about what's going on in all of those cases that I talked about where we're dealing with matters outside the traditional philosophical envelope of concerns for discussions with trust. But I certainly think that that's something that a good philosophical theory of trust should do. It should account for the way that we think about things that aren't just confined to the traditional philosophical discussions of interpersonal trust, and actually get us to think about the way that people are using language and using their ideas right the way across all of those different domains. That's going to be the goal, one of the things that the book needs to do. And when I have finally finished it, you can tell me whether or not I've managed that. I guess you can tell me whether or not you think I've managed it once I'm partway through this series of videos, and I'm sure you will. But let me know in the comments down below, what do you think that a good philosophical theory of trust should do? What do you think the book that I am writing should deliver, if it's actually going to be a good and valuable contribution? Don't be shy, tell me what you think, and we'll see whether or not this research book can include some discussions of that. That would be a really, really exciting thing to be able to do as I'm developing it. I hope this strikes you as an interesting and exciting project for me to be talking to you all about. And I hope you got something from the discussion about what a good philosophical theory of trust should do according to me. Until next time, stay suitably trusting.